The movie begins with a long aerial shot of a beautiful Roman suburb on a pleasant afternoon. We hear several phone conversations over the birds chirping. An Italian man is calling his friend Dario to remind him of their dinner appointment on Friday, in the home he shares with his wife Sarah. Dario confirms that he'll be there on time, along with his partner. Then we hear the voice of an Italian woman leaving a message to her friend Chiara, also inviting her to dinner on Friday. Chiara responds that she was working out at the gym, and that she and her partner will surely come. The next two voices are male. Matteo also confirms that he'll come to the dinner with his partner, and asks if they should bring wine. Finally, Giulia also confirms to her female friend that she'll be at their place with her partner. Meanwhile, the camera gradually swoops down to a terraced house between several old buildings. Two casually dressed young friends, Luca and Francesco, are discussing the notion of soulmates. They are drinking wine, and Luca fills a plate with freshly barbecued bread. Francesco vehemently upholds the hermaphrodite theory set forth by ancient philosopher Plato, which Luca rejects as ridiculous. Francesco explains that humans used to be harmonious and androgynous entities before the gods split them in half, as an act of jealousy. He claims that this is the reason why everyone constantly strives to find their missing half or soulmate. He supports his view with the fact that many couples that used to date in high school are now living together. However, Luca doesn't support this view, although he's happily married to Sarah. He says that he wouldn't have led a miserable and lonely life had he never met Sarah, describing a hypothetical situation in which his family had moved to Boston while he was still a child. He doesn't believe that people are destined to meet their soulmates, and compares Plato's idea with an unexplained apple theory. They sit down at the table where their wives are also drinking wine. Francesco's wife, Federica, asks them what they're talking about, and they present their opposing views. Luca's wife Sarah supports the notion behind Francesco's theory, as it is heartwarming and romantic. Francesco says that he had other girlfriends before he met Federica, but he immediately knew she was the one. Luca is also reminded of his previous girlfriends, but he doesn't believe those relationships were meaningful. Francesco realizes that he's unable to convert Luca to his point of view, and Luca and Sarah decide to tell them a story that will convince them that soulmates don't exist. The story began 2 years before, soon after Luca and Sarah got married and moved to the terraced house. They invited 4 friends to lunch. Luca invited Dario and Matteo, who briefly met Sarah's friends Chiara and Giulia at the wedding. All of the guests are single, but Luca is adamant that they don't have a grand scheme to pair anybody up and that he and Sarah just want to enjoy a few beers with their friends. Still, the boys are invited earlier than the girls so they can learn something about Sarah's friends. The host described Giulia as a smart and confident girl who always knows what she wants. She works in a financial firm, while Chiara is an anesthetist at the local hospital. Both are described as immensely attractive, but Chiara is a sweeter type of girl who constantly knocks men off their feet. As a womanizing lawyer, Dario is suspicious that they want to pair up the prettier girl with the bookish Matteo, who works as an editor in a publishing house, and is supposed to be more sensitive than him. The 4 guests talk to one another and connect on social media, but everyone leaves on their own. In the evening, Dario goes out to walk his dog and sits on a park bench. He exchanges chat messages with Giulia. He explains his dating tactics to the silent pet. He gave her his number and told her the meringues she posted looked inedible. This way she knows he took a peek at her profile, and the ball is in her court. She texts him the following day, daring him to make better meringues. Cheating is Dario's only recourse. He buys the dessert from a pastry shop and takes a photo after pouring flour on the table. Ingenious as he may be, he makes a rookie mistake. Giulia quickly spots the box from the pastry shop. Dario admits defeat, but Giulia nevertheless accepts his dinner invitation. The scenes of Dario's plight are interspersed with Matteo's endeavor to win Chiara. His desperation leads him to consult a relationship book, but he's unsure if he should call her only after 24 hours have passed, as instructed. He confers with his colleague Stella, who thinks that it would be more appropriate to send a text. In the end, he manages to summon the courage and call her before 24 hours have passed, and Chiara responds positively to his timid approach and cordial flirtation. She agrees to dine with him at an exquisite and secluded restaurant. Unfortunately, he fails to make a reservation, and they drive to the faraway location only to find there's a wedding going on. Matteo is convinced he's blown his chances with Chiara, but the bride suddenly appears and mistakes them for distant relatives. They tell her the truth, but she invites them anyway. Matteo and Chiara enjoy the celebration and end the night with a passionate kiss. Dario and Giulia's date begins with a casual conversation about pets. His approach is laid back, but Giulia proclaims her boredom with the courting ritual that consists of texting and bogus attempts at cooking. She says things would go a lot quicker if they went straight to the point, admitted the attraction, and went at each other silly while watching Netflix series. Dario's eyes light up as soon as she drops the F-bomb, and he immediately asks for the check. He leaves her flat the following morning, and they agree to remain non-exclusive. Still, Giulia asks him to call her. The movie flashbacks to the lunch at Luca and Sarah's place. Before the girls arrive, Luca admits how Sarah felt that Dario would be a better match for Chiara, although they have fewer things in common. Sarah believes that opposites attract, whereas Luca is convinced that a couple can succeed only if the people involved have similar characteristics and interests. What follows is a tangential course of events, with Matteo waiting for 24 hours to pass before he calls Giulia, and Dario trying to seduce Chiara. Matteo is still nervous and decides to have coffee in the bookstore on the bottom floor of the publishing house, where he chances upon Giulia. She's decided to follow the book recommendation he gave her the previous day, and he suggests a few other titles. They go out to dinner, and she tells him she didn't like one of the books. He promises to take her to a wonderful isolated restaurant, and she insists he calls to make a reservation. He assures her that he never needed to make a reservation there, but Giulia persists. Matteo finally gives in and is surprised to find out that there's a wedding at the restaurant. Giulia suggests a nearby place. Their conversation is lively and there's palpable chemistry between them, but they don't seem to have too much in common. Still, their mutual attraction is sufficient for Giulia to invite Matteo to her home. On the same day, Chiara inadvertently backs her car into a scooter. Luckily, the damage is confined to the vehicles, and she hires Dario as a legal consultant. He goes to her home to explain the legal situation, and finally invites her to dinner. They go to an open-air restaurant. Chiara reveals her frustration and loneliness by describing how her elderly neighbors are constantly making love, while the only company she has is her cat. She explains their repetitive and loud movements by way of singing the opening notes of Beethoven's famous Fifth. She thanks him for dinner as they wait for the bus to arrive, and Dario leans in to kiss her. Chiara pulls away and starts laughing. She says it's been ages since she had to evade a kiss, and tells him she stopped dating guys of his ilk. Meanwhile, the bus arrives, and Dario goes in after Chiara. He tells her he'll get off at the next stop, and asks her to clarify what she meant. She says she had him down as a player as early as the lunch they had at Luca and Sarah's, where she quickly decided that he wasn't her type. Dario admits that he doesn't want a serious relationship, but says that she also seemed to desire a heated night with him. Chiara rejects this, stating that she seemed relaxed because she had already made a decision not to be with him. Dario explains that this attitude is precisely what made her so irresistible. Chiara seems flattered by the compliment, but repeats that she only wants him as a friend. Dario turns to look at her before he gets off the bus, and tells her that he doesn't befriend girls of her type. The story jumps 2 months ahead, picking up on the previous version of events. This is the point where things start to get complicated, as many viewers will probably find it somewhat difficult to distinguish between the divergent storylines. Matteo is still seeing Chiara, who frequently stays over at his flat. He tells her about a book edited by his colleague Stella, which proposes that a girl can officially attain girlfriend status after she's left 20 objects at her partner's home. They start counting her things, which amount to 19, disregarding the contents of her purse. Chiara picks up an old blanket that Matteo wanted to throw away, but Chiara likes it because it smells of him. Matteo gifts it to Chiara, which means that she finally has 20 things in his apartment. Matteo celebrates her officially attained title, and Chiara regards him with a smile. Dario is leaving the gym where he exercises with his friends, including Luca. He plans to end things with a girl he's been seeing, and Giulia texts him to come to her home. She tells him about her interview for a job in Lisbon, which she doesn't believe will come to fruition, and about a guy at work who tries to seduce her. Dario leaves, and the scene suddenly changes to the other version of events. Chiara calls Giulia and tells her that Dario tried to kiss her, and Giulia tells her that a colleague is trying to seduce her. Giulia suddenly realizes that she hasn't gotten her period for 2 months. She calls Matteo and tells him they need to talk. He asks her jokingly if she's going to tell him that she got pregnant. The silence which follows speaks volumes. He apologizes for the attempted joke, and Giulia tells him to come over and bring pizza. Matteo is distraught over the news he just received but promptly goes to her place. She tells him that she hasn't been with anyone else, and he asks if she intends to keep the baby. He assures her the kid won't grow up without a father, and suggests that they get married. Giulia thinks that would be going too far, and Matteo asks what would be the desired level of his involvement, on a scale from 1 to 10. She responds with 7, which both of them agree would be the perfect level. The next scene shows Luca and Sarah discussing Giulia's pregnancy with Dario and Chiara. They're all worried over this unexpected turn of events since Giulia and Matteo are basically strangers who suddenly became future parents. Sarah is particularly optimistic that everything will turn out fine, due to the evident chemistry in their relationship. Chiara tells Dario about something she read in a book, namely that a girl must leave 20 things in her partner's home before she can be officially labeled a girlfriend. Dario quickly dismisses this notion, but Chiara persists, and asks him how many things Giulia has left at Matteo's. Dario answers that she hasn't even been there. This allows Chiara to drive her point home. She thinks that it's irrational for two people who barely know each other to try and raise a child. Dario compares the situation to failed marriages and states that the child could be properly raised by parents who are only friends. Chiara reminds him of what he said previously, that he doesn't believe in friendship between a man and a woman. Dario explains that he didn't mean that at all, but merely that he couldn't be friends with Chiara. He realizes that Matteo and Giulia will need their help with the child, so he decides to change his mind and offer his friendship. Chiara is happy to finally become Dario's friend. Later on, Dario sleeps with the secretary from work and Chiara helps him get rid of her by bursting into his room and pretending to be his slighted, recently wedded wife. She reminds him that she looked after his dog for 2 days while he was away, and Dario lets her keep his apartment keys. Matteo and Giulia are discussing baby names while drinking coffee in a shopping mall. Matteo quickly rejects Andrea and suggests they give the baby a more original name, Vega, inspired by his favorite video game character. The story suddenly shifts gears, and Matteo from the other reality walks by, holding hands with the pregnant Chiara. He's apparently put forth the same name suggestion, and Chiara responds that she doesn't want to name the baby Bruce Wayne, although Batman is her favorite character. Matteo proposes a compromise. They will name their first child after Bruce Willis, and the second after retired soccer player Wayne Rooney. All 6 friends go out to dinner, and Chiara and Matteo announce their decision to get married after 3 months. Dario goes out to have a smoke, and an attractive girl who works for another lawyer starts hitting on him. Dario says goodbye and leaves the restaurant with Giulia, and tells her that she isn't the only girl he's rejected. Giulia tells him that she also hasn't been seeing anyone else, and they passionately embrace and kiss by the river. Giulia is the one who's pregnant in the following scene. She receives an offer to work in Portugal for 6 months, starting in June. She doesn't think she'll be able to go, since she's supposed to give birth in February. However, Matteo tells her that the 3 of them could go together. Giulia is very happy to hear this and kisses Matteo with warm affection. Matteo's boss offers him a promotion, but Matteo rejects the new job as he will have to stay in Italy. He suggests Stella for the position, as she is also capable of performing the job. He meets with Chiara and Dario in a restaurant and informs them of his decision to turn down the promotion and go to Portugal with Giulia and the baby. Chiara leaves the restaurant. Noticing the way he looks at her, Matteo urges Dario to admit his infatuation. Dario doesn't admit a thing, but Dario tells him that he himself would pursue her if things had played out differently. The day of the wedding has arrived. Both opposing storylines are intertwined as we see Chiara riding in the back seat of the car, and Giulia getting out the door. Both brides seem genuinely happy to be marrying Matteo, who also regards both Chiara and Giulia with love and warmth. The story reverts to the initial lunch, and Francesco remembers that Luca and Sarah actually did go to a wedding the previous year, which means that only half of their story is fabricated. Luca confirms to Francesco and Federica that Matteo really got married, but claims that it isn't important for them to know the identity of the bride. He urges them to hear the story to the end, which continues with Dario saying goodbye to Giulia at the airport. He tells her that he didn't want her to go away for 6 months, but he didn't know how to say it. She goes anyway, leaving him dejected. She hears a baby crying while she waits for her flight. She suddenly becomes the other Giulia, and the baby is in fact hers. Matteo takes him from her arms and manages to calm him down. He's fulfilled Giulia's wish to name the baby Andrea. As she sees how much he loves the baby, Giulia realizes that she's deeply in love with Matteo. She tells him that she loves him, and they kiss. Chiara and Dario have also come to Lisbon in order to see the humpback whales. Unfortunately, the baby is too young to be admitted on the boat, and Matteo has to stay with Andrea while the others enjoy the cruise. Chiara and Dario share a tender moment on the boat, and they finally end up in each other's arms. A few hours later, Dario goes to the bathroom of the apartment where all 5 of them, including Andrea, are staying. Chiara opens the bathroom door as he approaches, and tells him that earlier she got caught up in the moment and wouldn't want to ruin their friendship. Dario agrees and says that he only wanted to use the toilet, although he obviously feels hurt. Chiara sees this and seems to regret her decision. Dario is suddenly back with Giulia. He's come to Lisbon to see her and meet her new friends. One of them agrees that long-distance relationships are the worst, and Giulia tells another friend that they haven't stopped arguing since the moment he arrived. She also hasn't told him that she has been offered to stay in Lisbon until the next summer. She's received the same offer in the alternate storyline. Matteo tells her they can stay, but she gathers her Portuguese friends and announces her decision to return to Italy. Returning to the previous reality, she finally informs Dario that she's been offered to stay in Lisbon while she's driving him to the airport. She hasn't accepted the offer, but Dario is infuriated because she didn't tell him sooner. She responds that there was never a right moment, since they've been quarreling throughout his stay in Lisbon. He boards the plane without saying goodbye. It's 2 months later, and Luca and Sarah have invited Dario to their home. He's unpleasantly surprised to meet Chiara's boyfriend Alberto, who is also a doctor. Alberto has to go to work, and Dario drives Chiara to her home. He makes fun of Alberto, and Chiara accuses him of jealousy. Dario gets annoyed and tells her that he can't be jealous because of what she told him on the day they met, that she doesn't go out with guys of his ilk. Chiara goes to her front door and turns back with a wistful look. Chiara wants to sleep with Matteo in a restaurant's toilet cubicle. They're trying to conceive, but Matteo refuses to conceive a child in a toilet. He tells her he might be in the mood when they get home. They're having dinner with an established writer, and Matteo pitches his idea for a horror novel the writer previously discarded. He tells him that he managed to find a publisher in London. This is the city where the next scene takes place, 2 months later. Matteo is in a hotel room with Stella, who has taken over his role in the project. She's convinced the writer to discard the horror idea once again and write a dark mystery instead. She apologizes to Matteo, but he agrees that her idea was better and congratulates her on her success. They kiss on the bed, then order scotch and make love. Chiara calls Matteo's cell, but he doesn't answer. Back in Rome, Chiara is in the 7th month of pregnancy, and she and Matteo are shopping for baby accessories. No longer able to keep it in, he tells her that he was feeling depressed when his projects in London fell through, and found solace in Stella's arms. He assures her the affair didn't mean anything to him. But Chiara gets understandably upset, cries, and shouts at him in front of everyone at the store. Back to the alternate storyline, Chiara is still seeing Alberto. He invites Dario to dinner so he can meet his friend, Lucia. They immediately hit it off, and later leave together. Chiara is jealous of their affection and tells Alberto that she'll sleep at her house because she has to get up early in the morning. She goes to Dario's home, where she expects to find Lucia. However, Lucia isn't there, and Chiara asks Dario whether he really just wanted to use the toilet after they kissed on the boat in Lisbon. They start kissing and tearing off each other's clothes. Andrea celebrates his first birthday, and Matteo goes inside the house with Giulia. She's surprised to see that Chiara and Dario have become a couple, but Matteo proclaims that he doesn't find it so surprising. He wants to get something off his chest, but Giulia tells him that she's already seen the messages he sent to Stella. He told her that he loved Giulia, and that their affair was a mistake. He cries and apologizes profusely, but Giulia is visibly hurt by his actions. She kisses his forehead and tells him that she's pregnant again. Chiara's water has just broken, and Sarah is rushing her to the hospital. Sarah and Giulia stay by her side while Luca waits in the hall. Dario comes in and asks him where is Matteo. Luca tells him that Chiara is still angry over his affair with Stella. Sarah and Giulia come out in the hall, and Sarah tells them that Chiara still hasn't given birth. Dario is shocked to see Giulia, who tells him that she came back from Lisbon 2 weeks ago. She tells him that she hasn't gone out with anyone since their fight, that she's missed him all along, and that she was desperate for him to call. Dario tells her that he also never stopped loving her, and he apologizes for not having the guts to call her. They embrace and kiss while Matteo appears in the hall. He later returns from the delivery room and announces that Chiara gave birth to a healthy daughter. All of them celebrate and go to see the baby, but Dario and Giulia remain in the hall. Luca has finished the story, and Francesco says that it was interesting but alas only partially true. Luca repeats that it doesn't matter which parts were true, and explains the apple theory he mentioned at the beginning. He is convinced that two people don't need to have many things in common to become a successful couple and that relationships make people change. If a person is represented by a bright red half of an apple, they can find an apple with a darker shade of red. Both halves will gradually adapt to each other's color, even though they may never become a perfect match. People continually change while they're in a relationship, therefore canceling every what-if possibility. This is why Luca didn't want to tell them who is Matteo's partner. Francesco responds that they will manage to find out even if he doesn't tell them, but doesn't realize that this will happen right away. Matteo is already parking the car or the scooter, accompanied either by Chiara or by Giulia. The same goes for Dario. The four of them come out on the terrace and shake hands with Luca, Sarah, Francesco, and Federica.